on my car radio, I have the Sirius system, and I enjoy listening to old time radio. And it's always interesting to see how the announcers warm up the audience. Thank you. We're looking at the book of Genesis, and we're in chapter 12. We talked last week about the transition from chapters 1 to 11, the world in general, the issues, the problems, the situation, and then instantly the closing of the focus down onto this single family. That it is, as the problem began with a single man and a woman, the solution is going to have to begin with a single man and a single woman. God is not interested in programs. Too often in churches, we have programs. God is interested in persons. And so we saw last week how God promised to bless Abraham. And again, that goes right back to chapter 1. He made them male and female and blessed them. But curse has entered the world. God is determined that blessing will come. And so we talked about the unspiritual blessings that God offered to Abram and Sarai: a baby, land, a reputation. And we said that what God is doing there is he's seeking to establish his trustworthiness. I know what you want, Abraham. Would you let me give them to you? Rather than you somehow grasping them for yourself in whatever way you could, would you let me give them to you? And as I said, all the angels held their breath. Because I'm confident that God had made that offer to lots of other people. And the other people said, no. Leave my whole support system, everything that I depend upon for my identity, for my life, leave that and hang it all on you? No way. But this couple did, for whatever reason. And that's one of the things I'm going to find out when I get to heaven. What were the circumstances in their lives that they said, well, why not? Why not? Let's give him a chance. So that's where we were when we stopped last time. Now notice, again, I haven't been terribly explicit about this, but the process of Bible study begins with observing, that you see what is there. So look at verse 7. What did the Lord do? He appeared. He appeared. My goodness. Doesn't say he said. He appeared. How do you think he appeared? Noticeably, yes. Evidently. Like an ordinary person. Very frequently, later in the biblical text, we will have the angel of the Lord. Now that's English. The actual Hebrew is the word messenger. We, of course, as soon as we think angel, we think of a bright person with a halo and wings. Not necessarily. And especially, I think this becomes clear when in the story of Samson's mother, he looks like a man. And then when they offer some food on the altar, he goes into the fire and goes up, and they say, oops. So God appears in a variety of ways in the Old Testament. He appears, as Charlie said, indistinguishable from an ordinary human being. He appears as a messenger of the Lord, apparently somewhat different than an ordinary human being, but there he is. Now, that's the observation. We observe that he appeared. Now, the next question is, there are three questions. First of all, definition. What? And we've just talked about that. How might he have appeared? Now comes the second question. Why? Why do you think God chose, in this instance, to appear?
Make it believable, but yet the person who was there had to have some presence about them, that,
Yeah.
so that he could believe it.
Yeah. To make it believable? To motivate? To make it a personal thing? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. You get his attention, yeah.
So maybe the possibility, someone, if you think of something yourself, you have doubts, but if someone is there to reassure you.
To make it concrete. Abraham has trusted him. They have come, Abram has trusted him. They've come to the land, and God appears.
He's really studying this apart from all the stuff that they had known before.
Yeah. It makes it memorable. Yes, yes.
Being how it's different from Moses. God comes, so where this is a holy place, and yet it's ordinary.
And notice what God says, verse 7. Two things. To your offspring. I'm confirming what I said back there in Haran. You're going to have children. To your offspring. And what's the second thing? I will give this land. So in a real sense, God is nailing it down. As Janice said, he's making it memorable. He's making it concrete. And so what is Abram's response? He builds an altar. Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. He has appeared to me, and he has confirmed his promises. I think maybe I'm dealing with God here. And I suspect that if this was an ordinary human in appearance, the words settled it. I'm not just talking to an ordinary man here. So in a variety of ways, God tries to settle things in our hearts, to nail them down. Dan? Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes.
Think they would have to, because here was a person that he didn't know, and yet he said, your offspring will inherit the land. So.
Yeah, 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 yeah. This wasn't just a guy walking down the road. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I think that in his own soul, he said, this is not an ordinary experience that I'm having here. Yeah, yeah. Yes, Kevin. No, no. Yes, yes. I think probably I've mentioned this before, but I love what Dr. Kendall used to say. He said, here's Abraham and Isaac walking through the land, and Abraham says, isn't that a beautiful city we own over there? And Isaac said, Dad, we don't own a bit of it. Well, we're going to. So, yes. And that's, of course, what Hebrews said. And as we'll talk about it, the only piece of this land Abraham ever possessed was the field in which his wife was buried. That's it. So you talk about him as the forerunner of living by faith. I don't think any of us are in heaven yet. But we're all living because he said, you got it. It's yours. We're living by faith. Sheila. Yeah, that's great. He pitched his tent, but he built the altar. Okay, as I've said before, and I talk about that a little bit more in the background for the next section of the book. This is a time of great people movements. It's upheaval. The early Bronze Age has fallen apart, and now we're in the Middle Bronze Age. Nobody woke up on January 1st and said, oh, it's the Middle Bronze Age now. But from our perspective, and they're trying to put it all back together again and not succeeding very well. So notice, where is Abram when he has this experience? Verse 6. Yes, he is by the great tree of Morah at Shechem. Okay. Shechem is here. So this will be the place that Jacob comes back to, and we'll talk about that when we get there. So God has appeared to him. He has settled. So does he stay there? What's the text say? The Negev is a word for southland, and that's down here. About 100 miles. You own the land? No, you don't. The migrants were not permitted to stay in one place more than 6 months. And they were not permitted to buy any land. And God says, this is your land. Oh my goodness. Okay. We don't know this for sure, but almost certainly at the outset of the story, Abram was a polytheist. He worshiped many gods. And one of these gods showed up and made these incredible promises to him and led him to this land. Now, what is Yahweh trying to show Abram about himself? He's leading him toward monotheism, no question of that. But at this point, Yahweh is trying to show Abram something about himself. What has God shown thus far? Okay. Let me stop right there. Pagan gods don't speak. Pagan gods only communicate through oracles. That is, people who go into a trance, and there's an interpreter there who interprets the tongues in which they speak. The oracles don't speak in the ordinary language. They speak in gobbledygook. And there's an interpreter there who tells you the famous oracle was at Delphi in Greece. And a young woman sat over a crack in the earth. And every so often, sulfurous smoke would come up out of that crack. And when it did, she would babble. And when she did, the interpreters would tell you what she said. This God speaks. He shows up. Okay. Patty also said he's consistent. He's initiator. Let me think about that a moment. He seeks a relationship. You think so at this point? How? What's the evidence? Okay. No. That's where I'm a little bit cautious there. I think you could say he just shows up, he makes promises. But let's go on.
He's a guide.
We know the end of the story. Yeah, right. He certainly does in the end. I'm just not terribly sure we see it yet. All right. Okay, that's the word I'm hunting for. He's good. Yes. We were trying hard here. This God, whoever he is, he's on my side. He wants to give me what I want and what I need. Wow. I didn't have to build an altar first and make sacrifices and promises to get him to show up. He showed up. And showing up, he promised, if I can get that off, he promised some things, and he kept his promises, and they're good promises. Wow. Wow. I think I want to know more about this God. Yeah, I think, among the gods, he's the best one I've run into yet. Yeah. Sounds like a man who's worked on evaluations recently. He exceeds expectations. All right. Let's move on. Just give your money to them. Then you'll know it's not true. But that's an excellent point. Again, that's what happened to Abram back there at Haran. He got a phone call from somebody who said, I'm going to pay off. Yeah. And he found out, hey, that one was not a scam. Was not a scam.
With all that said, John, what was Abram's aspirations prior to God coming and saying, hey, I'm going to give you all this? Do we have an insight into that?
Well, yeah. He wanted ultimately to become grandpa. Remember the family situation, and we're going to come to that in the next chapter, but remember the family situation. It's a 3-generational hierarchy. There are the grandparents. And I say grandpa, grandma was pretty much in charge of the women. And Raj and Hepzibah are not here, but in India, the grandmother runs every woman's life in the family. So the grandparents, then the parents, and then the children. Well, your goal is to get there and be able to run things. And the grandfather basically had the power of life and death in the family. Yeah. So that really is about, prosperity, power, possessions. That's what he was after. And he was not going to get here because he didn't have any children. But that's what he was after. And God is saying, I got a little more in mind for you. Okay. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you see it in the story of Samuel. Hannah was picked on all the time by her rival in the family. You don't have any kids, do you? Too bad for you. Oh, so yes. Terrible shame for the woman primarily. They didn't understand about sterile sperm. But yes. Okay. So as I say in the background, this is about 1900 BC. It's in the Middle Bronze Age. In Egypt, you have basically a kind of a feudal situation. The Old Kingdom was an absolute monarchy. The Pharaoh was God, and that's the end of the story. After the breakdown that came at the end of early bronze, what happened is you've got a prime noble. And he is ruling basically with the permission of the other nobles. Each of those towns along the Nile River was something of a province in itself. They were called nomes. Interesting to think of Nome, Alaska, about as far from Egypt as you can get. And each one of those rulers basically gave this guy authority. He's on the top, but he's on the top with permission, not in the sense of absolute. And I think that will be a little bit significant to our discussion here. So in Mesopotamia, you've got sort of a three-way struggle. You've got these towns down here that are the remnants of the old Sumerian city-states. You've got up here these Amorites who came out of the desert, and they've established a significant city at a place called Mari. And up here, the city of Ashur is coming into prominence. So Egypt has sort of got it together, and they are the most stable of the kingdoms at this time in Abraham's life. Over here, you've got this three-way struggle going on. And finally, in 1700, one of these cities emerges, and it's the city called Babylon. And we know the guy who ran the show, his name is Hammurabi. So that's the world situation here. You've got this chaos going on over here. At the time of Abraham, these Sumerian cities were the strongest of the three, but eventually it's just Babylon that's going to emerge there. So that's the world situation. And you've got all of this stuff going on. The Amorites are coming both directions, not only into Mesopotamia, but also into Canaan. You've got the up here, the Hittites are emerging. So it's a chaotic time, and this is the time when Abram is around. Okay. So, chapter 12, verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. What about that statement? What's missing? God's direction. Abram does not ask God, should I go to Egypt? Or should I stay here in this land that you have promised to me? Now, it's always dangerous to go too much on what isn't said. But again, that's an important part of Bible study. Ask what isn't said. Yes, observe what is said, but think about what isn't said that maybe ought to be said. Abram is going to do this again. Pauline? Well, that's a good question. I don't recall an incident off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean he couldn't. But I think that's a fair point, that maybe at this point in his understanding, he doesn't realize I could. But whatever the reason, he doesn't. He simply makes a decision and says, wow, this land of God's, this land of promise, is no good. I don't know that he would, or one way or another. And he goes there. NIV says, I think, to live. The word that is used is a very significant word in the Old Testament. You got in a society 3 classes. I'm not sure why that board is acting so ugly today, but you've got the citizens, these are the people who were born there. You have the sojourners, a good King James word, who are not born there, but want to settle there. In other words, immigrants. And you have the foreigners. Foreigners are not born there, and they don't want to settle. They're just passing through. They're there for a while. You know, maybe business travelers, but they're not interested in settling. But these people are planning to settle. Why did Abram go to Egypt? To sojourn there. The King James also translated this word as strangers, which unfortunately gets confused with that one. And that's not good. These are people, these are immigrants. And if you're going to be a sojourner in Israel, the males have to be circumcised and they have to participate in the festivals. So these people want to become good Israelites. Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. So how does Abram come off in verses 13, 14, and 15? A liar. Now, we're going to be told over in chapter 20 that Sarai was actually his half-sister. But a half lie is still a lie. Why does he want her to lie? To save his own skin. I've told you before, look at pronouns. They will kill me. Say, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, that my life may be spared for your sake. Ouch. Ouch. He's not concerned about her. He's not concerned about her being thrown into a harem with maybe 100 other women. Now, forgive me, I'm talking as a male here, but would you want to live with 100 women? All of whom are competing for the Pharaoh and his interest? Harems were terrible places. Maybe you will never see the Pharaoh again after spending your first night with him. Maybe the rest of your life, you'll be locked in that place with a bunch of harpies. But hey, I'll live. I quote there what I've heard some women say. Well, Sarah had never had to deal with children. Of course she was beautiful in her old age. Children wear you out. But that is interesting to think you're beautiful and you're 90.
What was the plan for getting out of this after the initial contact? You know, where was this gonna end up going in his mind? You know, is the rest of his life gonna be like this?
He's going to live in Egypt.
He's going to Egypt to live.
And again, people in Canaan all wanted to go to Egypt. And nobody in Egypt ever wanted to leave Egypt. I mean, why would you want to go somewhere else when you're living in heaven? 72 degrees average year round. Might get up into the upper 80s in the summer, maybe. Might get down into the 50s in the winter, maybe. Rained 2 days a year. You had the world's first flush toilet, the Nile River. Once a year, it came down, washed all the dung out into the Mediterranean, and laid down a lovely layer of topsoil. Nile is perfect for irrigation, and the current goes north, but the winds go south. So you can coast down the river in your boat, do your business there, raise the sail, and go back up home. Who wants to leave? Abraham went there to sojourn, and if it cost him the mother of the promise, so what? Yep. 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 I'm afraid you're exactly right. God has a different idea. Yeah. So, the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house, and for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. Now, again, let's talk about observation. What do you observe in that statement? As one of my students once said, she was a babe. What else? God is faithful. What else? Yeah, yeah, yeah. But as far as he's concerned, at this point, Sarah's out of his life. She's in the harem. No, what I observe here is the excessive statement. It doesn't say Pharaoh made him rich. No, it says sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, camels. It's emphasizing how rich Pharaoh made him. I wonder why that is. And I think perhaps the answer is when God begins to bless, he blesses. So the amount here, I think, is very significant. Yeah, yeah. Male donkeys, male servants, female servants. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So, that's number 4 on the sheet. How did Pharaoh find out? I think that's exactly right. I think the Egyptian diviners. Pardon? Maybe the Lord spoke to him. Yeah, perhaps. I think the text would have said that. But this is what the Bible says. The Bible says, don't use magic. It is forbidden to you. Don't use divination, where you look at the stars, or the sheep's liver, or the flights of the birds. Don't do it. But it never says it won't work. It never says it won't work. It just says, don't you dare do it. So if that's true, if Pharaoh consulted his own magicians, and remember in the plagues, the magicians were able to do the first 3. If that's true, if Pharaoh consulted diviners or magicians, why aren't we told that? It's not important to the story. That's true. I think there's another reason. God's not going to give that stuff the time of day. What is this you've done to me? Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister so that I took her for my wife? So I'm going to kill you right here. Why doesn't the Pharaoh, who at that point is the most powerful man on earth, why doesn't he take revenge on Abram? He's afraid of him. Why is he afraid of him? Yeah, they couldn't stop the plagues. No, I don't think so. But I do suggest that, again, it's God at work. Whether Pharaoh knows why he is going to be generous to this guy or not, he is. And God has made Abram rich, and now he's going to keep him alive. What do you call that? Grace. Grace. Yeah. 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 Now, again, we don't know, and this will be true in Bible study. When you ask the questions, I observe Pharaoh could have taken revenge, but did not. Why did he not? Now, there'll be many times when the Bible will not give us a specific answer, and we need to think through the possibilities. He may not want the publicity. Yeah. What a dumb guy I was. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
She says, okay, I'll do this to save my husband. But when it comes to actually being the wife of Pharaoh or whatever, there's really a lot in her heart that's troubled. And you can see that, perhaps there was some emotional way in which she revealed, maybe not directly with the words, maybe it actually came from Sarah herself. And here's a man who thought highly of this woman. And then the truth comes out.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I think those are all possibilities. Yeah. But Pharaoh still could have killed both of them. I think another possibility is the great plagues. This woman is dangerous. This woman is deadly. I better get her out of here. The best way to get her out of here is with her husband. Because if I kill a woman who has magical powers, that won't kill the magical powers. Kevin? Exactly. That's another possibility. The point, though, is by all the reasons of earth, Abram should have died. He did not. And that he did not is an evidence of God's care for him. Vows. Yeah. Take your wife and go. Okay, so before I let you go, what is the end result of all this?
Blessed and sent on his way back.
He is kicked out. If he planned to sojourn in Egypt, he's not going to do it. God's going to say, go back. And he left a very rich man. Yes. So I'll let you think about question 8, and we'll talk about that next week. Let's pray. Father, thank you. Thank you for your endless grace. Thank you for your mercy to us. Thank you for the ways in which you are determined to bless us. Forgive us when we don't believe that. When we try to bless ourselves in all the wrong ways. Have mercy upon us, O Lord. In your name, amen. All right. Onward and forward.